is Eddie C, and welcome to my Positive Podcast. I'll bring you positive stories of people from all walks of life, because everyone has a story to tell. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to MPP, my Positive Podcast. I'm your host, Eddie C, and we have a very long but very interesting show for you today. I hope you had a fine week. I did. It's been very busy recently, which is one of the reasons why our shows are not as often as they used to be in the beginning. Performing again together with Soul Sister, with my duo Soulful, and a few other projects that I'm working on that you'll hear about in the future. Our theme for this week is about rhythm, and I chose this theme because it's very close to me. In fact, it is probably the most closest theme I have as far as subjects to talk about. And so I chose three special guests, and we're going to discuss about what rhythm means to them, how it's an impact on their lives, and how it can be an impact on your life as well. So if you're curious and want to know what's going to happen with my three guests, please tune in and stay positive. My name is Eddie C, and you're listening to my Positive Podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, my first guest is Olga Stuzhinskaye. She's a consultant here in Europe, based in the Brussels area. And she's going to tell you a lot about herself in this next interview. So please welcome her. How you doing, Olga?
Hi, Eddie. I'm doing great. Thank you. Thanks for welcoming me here.
Okay. I hope I got your name pronounced right.
It's close enough.
Okay. So can you tell my listeners a little bit about yourself? You know, how did you end up here? Because you're not from Belgium. So can you tell our listeners about that?
I'm not from Belgium, but I've been in Belgium for the past 20 years. I was born in Belarus. It's one of the countries of the post-Soviet Union. If some people know, some people don't, because it's not necessarily the country which is so well known in Europe. But at the same time, I should probably not say it now, was in view of the developments of last year and all the repressions against people that are taking place. But in any case, I was born in Belarus, and it's sadly so. I think it's traditionally a country with very limited freedom and is known for people leaving this country. If you look through the history, it's a country with a lot of sad developments, a lot of wars, a lot of repressions. If one thinks about Stalin, about the World War II, where every third person has died. And also, if you look at the famous people in the world who come from that country, such as Marc Chagall, for example, or Haim Soutine, or Shimon Peres, who was the president of Israel, or Louis Mayer, who established the famous company in the United States. So there are plenty of people who come from that country, but who have left it. And it has been so over centuries. So in a sense, I guess I was following the trend. At the same time, I would not say, or it's actually not true, I didn't leave for political or economic reasons. I came to Brussels 20 years ago as a nanny for a family of American diplomats, as au pair. And the plan was actually to stay here for 6 months to get some international experience, to learn a bit about the culture, but also American culture, because I came to stay with an American family.
Right.
It was a beautiful experience, but then, life rolls as a snowball. I started to study, then I got an internship in the European Parliament, and then a few years later, you find yourself having the life established, and there is nowhere to go back to. So that's, in very short, my story of how I ended up in Belgium.
Oh, wow. Well, I'm sure there's a lot that happened in between that. How long did you do the au pair stuff, working as a nanny?
For about a year and a half. Then I moved out and I was continuing with my studies. And I actually had a side job. I was working I was serving drinks at an American sports bar on Place Luxembourg, just in front of the European Parliament. That was a funny transition to start a stage in the Parliament itself after working in the bar just outside of the building.
How did you get involved?
It has also a little story behind it, because in Belarus I come from this very, let's say, politically active family. My mother was in the democratic opposition for a very long time, serving as a vice chair of one of political parties. And she also has established a large women's organization, which works until today, helping women to be more active politically, implementing all kinds of education projects. So I come from a family with those type of roots, so to say. And it was her who actually had her colleagues in the European Parliament from other countries, from the EU countries, from Netherlands, from Germany and others, who said, okay, we will be willing to engage your daughter for a stage, because we also need information what is actually happening in Belarus. Because back then, 20 years ago almost, there was very little, the flows of information were very small. There was very little information available in English language. So the parliament was also very interested in having me there as a source of information in first place and source of advice, in a sense, to the political group.
Wow. Wow. That's quite a story. And you're still quite young, basically. I mean, you look probably a lot younger than you are. But there's this that means that you're doing a lot of positive things.
Well, the story doesn't end there, because after the parliament, I received support by another organization. It was the NATO Parliamentary Assembly. So it's an assembly which gathers parliamentarians from NATO countries and has its secretariat here in Brussels, who also invited me to do a fellowship with them. And also with the support of this organization, but also many other international partners, both from Europe and from the United States, I must say. In 2006, I have established this NGO, which was called the Office for Democratic Belarus, which was basically serving this function of a liaison office with reformist groups in the country. So I stayed with this organization for almost 10 years. I was its founder and director, and the organization has implemented large number of projects supporting the democratic reforms, supporting civil society in the country, informing the international community where the country stands and what are the developments, and about the human rights violations, or you name it. It's been an amazing, amazing experience in my life. I'm very proud of the achievements that this organization has done, of everything we have achieved with our team. And I hope that at least it has made some contribution to more positive developments in this country and in this region in general.
Oh, well. Do you have any future plans to maybe go back
No,
one
I'm not
day,
planning to
or
go back.
do you plan on
And I
staying in
think
Europe?
it also is the question that, in a sense, the time period takes, after 20 years, it's very difficult, because my whole adult life has been in Belgium. I have received only Western education, more or less, or higher education at least, because I studied here in Belgium and I studied in the United States. I feel also that I and my family has made a big contribution to the future of my native country, to the future of Belarus. But at some point, I really, after having left the job and the organization that I have created, it was really a big transition period for me, like how to establish the life now differently, who am I also without all this work that I have been doing? What is my identity? And funny enough, in that period, it was in 2015 when I left the work, I started also to paint. And with the painting, so much of emotion came out.
Oh, wow.
All those emotion, all that sadness also, because that work has involved a lot of sadness over the years. It's much of it was about people suffering in that country, among others.
Mm-hmm. Well, can you tell us a little bit more about the painting? That's quite interesting. I just recently saw a series about Picasso and the women that were involved in his life that really influenced actually how he painted. It was quite an interesting series that I was looking at. But I know that painting is just like with basically any other creative art form, is a way of release, of expressing yourself. I do it as a musician. I try to do it sometimes as a photographer as well. So tell us a little bit more.
I don't have a particular style yet. I have been painting now since 2015, more or less, so for about 5 years. I think I'm not even looking for the style yet, for a particular style. I really do this as an exercise of expression. And sometimes it really happens. I do something, and then only a few months later, I understand what I wanted to say or what emotions came out of my soul, so to say, or what reference to which experience this painting is, or whatever. Sometimes it's not even painting, or more like an exercise with forms and colors. And I love playing with colors. So there is no particular style yet, but for the future, I would like to continue with this because I see really that this is such a medicine for my soul, and it's a big tool for transformation. And I would greatly recommend it to anyone, be it painting, be it photography, be it music, any artistic expression. I think does so good to us.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you wholeheartedly on that, because I also came here in my young years, and I spent my whole adult life here in Europe as well. So I can understand where you're coming from about adjusting to the situation. On those words, was it difficult for you to pick up on the language? Your English is so fluent, in certain ways even better than mine after all these years. And I'm coming from the States. No, but it's so fluent. Did you take special lessons for that? And you also speak Flemish as well. And French, I think, because you're living in Brussels, so you have to be able to get around. Most of the time they speak French there. At least that's my experience.
Funny enough, my first foreign language is actually German.
Oh, wow.
So when I came to Belgium, my English was my second language, but I spoke very, let's say, primitive. I could put only very primitive phrases together. But it helped a lot that I stayed with the American family, and I basically started my first degree, the bachelor's degree, with the University of Maryland campus here in Brussels, in English.
Okay.
So I had no choice. I had to learn the language very fast because I needed to study in this language.
Right.
And then, of course, after this degree, I started the job, which was in English. Then I did a fellowship at the Stanford University in the US. And I did an MBA degree here with the Solvay School later on. It was all in English. And obviously, if one works for so many years and does all the studies in one language, it does become good.
Well, how long were you in the States when you did study?
In the US itself, for the summer fellowship at Stanford, it was about 2 months. It was an amazing program which exists to this day. And it brings together all, let's say, democracy activists from around the world, from developing countries, from Africa, from Asia, from Eastern Europe, you name it, from South America. People with amazing backgrounds, amazing contribution to whatever they do in their countries, in the civil society, in the government, or legal services, whatever. So it's also a network which one keeps for life, really. And I'm so deeply grateful to the Stanford University and to the Center on Democracy and Development and the Rule of Law, who also keep up the alumni network very much alive and organize frequent events and keep communication. It's an amazing experience in life too.
Wow. Like I said, you've had quite a journey, which leads to my second question to you. The main question is, you've been quite busy with so many different things from, what you've been telling me, but you also have your own business. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Today's business grew basically from my previous work because in principle, I've been always doing development. And I have worked in the past with very different organizations. It's EU institutions in first place here in Brussels, but also with UN structures, with the Council of Europe in Strasbourg, with the OSCE, and with governments, with NGOs. Little bit with business, but not so much. At the same time, when I did my MBA degree, I had a very concrete interest. I wanted to see how the business world functions because I came from the NGO. I was very much in political world, but I had this curiosity also to learn, to see what the business world is like. And my today's business as a consultant, it's quite small. I mean, I work alone, but I work for different organizations who implement technical assistance projects. So they again help countries in transition to implement reform in very different sectors. For example, the biggest project where I work now is on youth. So it's helping young people in the neighborhood of the European Union, in the Eastern neighborhood, in my case, to have better opportunities for employment and to increase participation of young people in decision making, starting from the level of commune, let's say, from the very local level and going up to the national level and making contributions to the national legislation.
And what's the average age of the for the kids that you're working for?
Well, young people, the definition really varies, but let's say we can say it's from 14, 16 up to 30, more or less. But in different countries, it can be also. And of course, what is important also to see the difference, the needs of 16-year-old person would be very much different from a person who is 25 or 28.
Right, exactly.
We cannot put it all in the same basket. We really have to see that their needs greatly vary.
All right. Oh, that's a very good initiative because I feel that there's a lot of social media out there, but there's very actual real news happening. And how do you filter that? Or let's say pick out the right stuff for them to be able to know, well, this is really what's going on and not what you think is going on?
Well, this is not exactly our task because, we work with the government and we work with youth organizations which are established, which already filter the information themselves. And our task is more in a sense to help them see the good practices around the world and in the European Union in first place, and see if some of them they could adapt in their countries. For example, in the EU, there is this so-called youth dialogue, which is a structured dialogue with young people in every EU member state, where young people contribute to the decision-making and it goes to the top, to the EU level. So together with young people, with youth organizations from this region where I work, which is called the Eastern Partnership region of the European Union, we look into these good practices and see if something can be transferred to their respective country. The same we do with the ministries, which are responsible for youth affairs. For example, we can look at the good practices that the Council of Europe can offer and see if something can be offered to improve the legislation in these countries or practices, how the governments in these 6 countries where I work, how they listen to young people, what are the tools they use to consult young people.
Oh, that's fantastic work. So in all of that busyness that you have, what do you like to do in your free time other than painting?
I do also yoga. I do a lot of walking around Brussels, and I'm really glad that Brussels is a very green city that offers, spacey parks. And I live not far from the Étang d'Ixelles, which are these lovely ponds in pretty much the center of Brussels.
I was actually in Brussels this last weekend. They had a special day with a lot of marching bands, and it was quite exciting. I really enjoyed it.
In general, in Brussels, there is so much happening in terms of culture that I think for the small city that Brussels is, the volume of cultural events is amazing. So there is always something to do.
Yeah, well, it's a small city, but actually very condensed if I compare it, for example, to Antwerp, which is actually even smaller. There's a complete difference in cities and cultural. I think Brussels is a little bit more multicultural as far as the events and so on that are going on. Although they say Antwerp is supposed to be the most multicultural city in this part of Europe. I have my questions about that as well, but
yeah, there is definitely a difference. I think Brussels, since all the EU institutions, NATO headquarters are here, and a lot of people coming here who also work with these organizations, it's very multinational, multicultural. And plus Brussels, we know, is in the middle of, let's say, the certain division between Flemish part and Wallonian, and then the German part here in Belgium. So it's special, let's say. It's a bit like Washington, D.C., I suppose, in the United States.
Yeah, I guess you could say that. Yes, that's true. Well, listen, we're coming down to our last question, which is the theme for this particular show. And my theme is rhythm. So I would like to know, what does rhythm mean not only to you, but for you?
I don't know if you knew it about it or not. About me, I'm not good with music.
Okay.
It's something that I don't do, which is strange for a person who comes from the post-Soviet space, because usually we had this very strong, music schools, and every good family took their kid to learn music, which was not my case. But I appreciate, and I can distinguish, let's say, good or better. I don't know even how to call it in music. But what is rhythm for me? When you pronounce it, the first thing that comes to my mind is definitely visual rhythm. I see the rhythm in color and in shape. I love to see how the colors play with each other and how they come to this beautiful, balanced picture, how they create a rhythm. For example, I really like to paint squares. Sometimes I feel something and I really want to express it through squares.
Mm-hmm.
And this process of putting them together, what goes where, in which color and in which shape, whether they're bigger, they're smaller, these create this rhythm for me. And the second, it's about rhythm inside me. It's my rhythm of life and the rhythm of how my body and my soul communicate, if they are in balance, if they are talking to each other, if there is this healthy rhythm. And once I notice that it's not there for some external or internal, influence, because of some external or internal influence, it's so important to know self, how to come back to this. It can be yoga, it can be art, it can be anything. It can be walks, it can be talks with good people. But it is important to come back to this internal rhythm.
That's right. That's where it all starts. All starts with
Indeed.
rhythm. Well, listen, I'd like to thank you so much for coming on my show and sharing your story. It's quite unique. I think we could actually go on for another half an hour, and I'm sure we'll run into each other again, because you're also very good friends with a couple of artists, multi-talented artists I know, that also paint as well as make music. So, which is how we met, in fact. And so I know that our paths will cross again, and I really appreciate the work you're doing to try to get out there and help young people. And I wish you a lot of success in your future ventures with your company, and getting your communication out there, and helping folks to become a lot more aware and finding their rhythm within your whole work frame.
Thank you, Eddie. It was really a pleasure to be here, and I'm sure our paths will cross again. Good people always meet again.
All righty. Okay.
Thank you, and have a fabulous day.
Okay. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
This is My Positive Podcast with Eddie C. Well, ladies and gentlemen, my next guest and I go way, way back to a time that we were, students in high school. One of my best buddies during that time. We always had a chance to just get together and just talk all kind of stuff with each other. We just go way back. Anyway, my next guest, Mr. Gregory Washington. Hey, buddy, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's great to see you, Eddie. Great to see you.
It has been ages.
Yes,
absolutely.
It's been a long time.
Wow, man. Well, listen, can you tell me, we'll go right into the questions. I know there's a time difference here. It's like 4 o'clock in the morning, and what time is it there? Like 9?
Yes, 9 o'clock, about 8:55 exactly.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, well, we're gonna knock this interview out so we can get to my listeners because it's early for me. Well, listen, can you tell my listeners a bit about yourself, your background? I mean, I know a bunch about you, but my listeners don't. So maybe you can tell a little bit about yourself, your background, and where you came from and where you located now.
I'm in the southwest suburbs of Chicago, still in the area that we grew up in, not far. I'm still around with my parents, 30 miles from Gary. So for people that don't know, Gary, Indiana, in the United States, me and Eddie were high school buddies, as he said previously.
Exactly.
When we graduated, I went on to General Motors Institute. I stayed there for about a year. My father had a business going. I came back, worked with him, and then I ended up at Purdue University. Went down there for a semester, then I came up and went to Purdue Calumet and finished my schooling there. I worked with my father from like 1974 all the way up to, say 97, where we really had a business thriving. Still do the business deal, but it's not as big as we once had it. Once had up to like 120 employees. So that was my, I've been basically a family business from high school all the way up to now. Now I'm working with my brother. He started his business with, he's a DSP with Amazon. We deliver those packages to your door every day. Everybody be looking for that package. That's what we do now. So it's a different kind of business, but still self-employed. So that's a good thing about it. Still self-employed.
Wow. That's amazing, man. I remember one summer working with you and your dad back when our high school years, doing something a few times in the summer, a couple of offices. And I'll never forget, man, the first time I turned on one of these big buffing machines.
The buffing machine, right.
I know you always have to turn against the direction, because if you don't do that, you're going to spin with it. And I remember first time I turned that thing on, I thought I was going to be spun around like a top, man.
Right. You and Eddie, and as you recall, we had AC Foreman. He worked for us also.
Right.
So I'm also still in contact with him.
Oh, wow.
So he's in Chicago, but we still talk and stay in contact. And also another classmate of ours, Troy Young. I don't know if you remember him.
I remember Troy, and we keep in touch on Facebook.
Okay. So Troy is still. We hang out together. That's my running buddy now. After all these years, we still run together.
All right, man. I'd like to get Troy on the show once as well, because I haven't spoken to him in ages.
I'll try to make contact with him and tell him to do it.
All right. That would be lovely.
Okay.
Buddy. So tell us a little bit more about your business. You call it a
DSP, Delivery Service Provider.
Right. DSP. Yeah.
People order stuff from Amazon, and it's like at the station we work out of, it's in Chicago, South Side. It's about 7 more DSPs there. So it's 8 all together in that facility that we work out of. And we deliver packages from different zones. So they give us different zones to deliver. And we get those packages to people they looking for those packages. So that's what we do.
Wow. And especially nowadays with the online services.
Right. With this COVID going on, it's really growing. Nobody goes out anymore. They order everything online. So Amazon is.
That's amazing, man.
They doing it right now. Jeff Bezos is. That's why you can fly into space.
Well, he makes it possible for you and your brother to keep your business going.
Right. He self-employed. He got his daughter and his wife doing it with him. So once again, it's another family business.
Right.
Nothing. It's always good when you're your own boss.
That's true. That's true. That's true. That exactly. That's something that a lot of people, I think, a lot of young folks nowadays are becoming also more independent entrepreneurs.
Right. These young people now, they don't stay at one place. They vagabonds. If they don't like what's going on, they out of there. So it's a little different from when we were growing up. Our parents, they worked at one place for 50 years and waited on that pension and lived a good life off that pension. But not today. It's a little different.
It's if you ask me, it's a lot different.
It's a lot. Yeah, it's a lot different. Yeah, a lot different. They don't even have the same ideas that we have. So
no, that's
but
true.
You just have to go with it. That's just the evolution of the world right now.
That's true. I think that a lot of because of the internet, it has its good sides and its downsides over the years, and also with the smartphones. I mean, practically everybody has a smartphone, and God forbid if you go out the door without your telephone, it's like
right. It's like the end of the world. Naked.
Yeah,
like
right.
Without naked, man.
I've actually gotten myself to the point now that sometimes I will just go out the door without a telephone. Sometimes if I take a walk, so just to have that feeling of breaking away from all social media. And I also
right. I think
go ahead.
You need to take a break. You need to take a break from social media because it's social media can be good, but it's a lot of bad stuff out there. Misinformation, people believe it, and it's just you got to be careful with it. And I try to tell some of these young people that you can't believe everything that's on social media. It's just not true.
No.
With this COVID going on, they're getting all this information about the vaccine and why not to take the vaccine. And it's just a lot of misinformation.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, everybody has the right to make a decision, but they should have the proper information. Then it's on you.
Proper information is very important, and then a person can make a choice about what they want to do or not.
Right.
So outside of your business with the delivery service, what else are you busy with these days?
Just trying to enjoy life a little bit, man. I pay my dues and trying to get a little break when I can. I don't like sitting around, so I try to stay busy. With my brother, I work with him like 3 days a week. So the other time I still do a little of the janitorial business that we have going. I do a little of that.
Right.
Then I have a wife, so I try to do some things with her. So
how did you guys meet?
Okay, well, originally we met through a mutual friend. Actually, my sister-in-law introduced us, and through her, she had a friend at work, and she knew somebody, and it went from there. Then we ended up dating for maybe 20-something years now. We got married 10 years ago.
Oh wow! Okay.
So
it was a long engagement.
Right. Yeah, I have a daughter from a previous marriage, and she has 2 children from a previous marriage. So we got a blended family. So
nothing wrong
it's all
with that,
good.
Man. Nothing wrong with that.
Good.
Oh, fantastic, man. And so how long do you plan on going on? Are you going to pass it on?
Well, I'm gonna work with my brother as long as I can till he tells me to get out of here. But like I said, I like to stay busy. So I don't work hard. I try to work smart.
That's it.
So
that's it.
So I like to. Right at this point in my life, I don't think I should be working hard. But you still got to pay those bills.
That's right. You got to keep the chimney smoking. Huh?
That's right. That's right.
Do you ever get back to Gary for visits or just drive through sometimes?
Oh, well, I go to Gary once a week because my parents are still there.
Okay.
So on Mondays,
That's a blessing,
my
man.
parents live in
That's wonderful.
Man, my parents live in Miller Beach. It's a section in Gary, Indiana, for all your listeners. People probably wonder where it's Gary. It's a suburb of Chicago. Everybody knows what Chicago is. Chicago's not all the bad stuff that you hear about on the news and stuff. It's good parts of it, but unfortunately, we only hear about the bad.
Yeah. Well, the media always plays the bad things up pretty, because that's
they make it sensationalized everything.
That's something that's sort of to get people's attention. But I always tell people, I said, to me, the Chicago area itself, Chicago, the city of Chicago, is a wonderful city to visit.
Right.
And
it's the best summer city in the world.
I agree. I have
in the summertime. Now in the wintertime might be a little different. But summertime is a wonderful
wintertime.
city.
You don't want to be in the middle of the hawk, as they say.
No, you remember the hawk.
I remember the hawk. I mean, it would get cold. It can get very cold there, right? That wind chill factor kicks in from Lake Michigan, and if you're not dressed right, you're gonna freeze your cookies off, man. I tell you.
Absolutely.
Wow. So you've had this actually very amazing family career. It's wonderful that your parents are still around and going strong.
Yeah, my parents are still kicking. My parents at this point, my father just had his 87th birthday. No medication.
Wow.
Some eye drops. My mother's not on any medication, so it's a blessing.
Absolutely.
It's a blessing.
That's just wonderful. You have to definitely say hello for me when you talk to them. I would definitely.
I told them that I talked to you and I was going to do this podcast tonight, so they were happy. As a matter of fact, I talked to William Thompson. We went to the prom.
Right,
together.
Remember Bill? Yeah. He was on one. He's been on one of my shows as well.
Okay, yeah. So we had a class reunion about 2 years ago. We got to really catch up. So now I really follow him on Facebook. Right. Him and his wife, they are some characters with him trying to eat right and all this good stuff.
Yeah, right. So, no.
We call him Burger King Bill.
Exactly. Well, you should check out the episode that I did with him. It's
okay.
It's on all the podcast platforms, or you go to my website.
Okay.
And you can hear that particular conversation that I had with him. It's wonderful.
Yeah, he's a nice guy. Yeah. So I actually had that picture of the prom when we went to the prom together, and it was our junior year, I think it was.
Yeah, it was our junior year, right?
And our parents had that. My parents have these pictures. All your parents keep all the photos and stuff that you forget about.
Right.
So I went through the album one day, and she had this picture. I said, "Wow." I said, "Wow, that's me, Eddie, and Bill."
Oh, you got to send me. Please scan a copy of that for me. I would love to have it.
I will do that. And I remember after all these years, I can remember that I had that my father's blue mink, and we all were piled up in there. We went up to this place in Michigan City. I think it had dinner. So yeah, it brought back memories when I saw that picture, that photo. So it was great.
Wow, yeah, that's a fantastic time. Well, we had a bunch of fun times in high school. I remember always talking about we were talking about music, talking about basketball,
Right. We went to all the games.
Yeah.
We were in what club were we in together? We had our little sweaters. And,
right. I remember, man.
And we
we had the High White Club.
Yeah, High White. Yeah,
right.
We were. We all had a great time in high school. I tell everybody that was a great time for us. And you look at the West Side now; it's probably the only high school left in Gary. So not really. Nobody would ever thought Roosevelt would be gone, but it is pretty much.
Oh, wow. That's wow.
Yeah, so
that's amazing. It was kind of sad for me the last time that I went to Gary, and that's been it's been a good, say, 10 years That was
Okay.
the last time I went to Gary because my mom was still living there at the time. She's now living in St. Louis, Missouri.
Okay.
And so after she moved, I didn't really go back anymore. Afterwards, I went once with my daughter to let her.
Okay.
She wanted to see the house of Michael Jackson. At that time.
Okay. Yeah, man,
Right,
2300 Jackson Street.
right. So we went
Yeah.
there, but the city has become really
Yeah,
gone down.
it's
Still
really
go.
right down. Yeah, has so much potential. We just can't, they can't seem to. I don't know what it is. They just can't seem to get it together because there's a lot of potential here.
Well,
It's right on the
right.
water. So my parents live out there, and it's really nice. It's like a couple of blocks from the beach, so you can walk to the beach from their house.
Oh,
So,
that's great. But that's
unfortunately,
that's still a very good
that's
part.
the best part
That's the
of
best
Gary.
part of Gary that's left. Yeah. Because I
Right.
remember
Yep.
the
Yep. So.
Palace Theater and all those places, they're all gone.
Right, all they all gone. Yeah, it's nothing like the high school,
Times,
the years when we were in high school. Nothing like that. We could walk up and down Broadway for hours and
absolutely.
just go from store to store and go to Coleman's. We go try to buy records out of Coleman's and
Absolutely.
all that good stuff.
And I remember,
So it's a lot
remember
different.
the White Castle and
Right. And Walgreens had that little counter. We would go in there and eat, and it was just a lot different back there. People don't realize I really feel sorry for the kids now that didn't enjoy that. And now you can hardly walk the streets and got to worry about people shooting at you and all that stuff. But we really had fun in high school.
absolutely.
We really
Those
did.
were really, you could actually say happy days.
Yeah,
Especially compared
it
to now.
were happy days. We would go to games, and the gym would be rocking just like a professional game. It's just a lot different from what high school is now. Now they gotta keep kids out the gym because they don't want fights and all that kind of stuff.
And
We had a little skirmishes, but it was nothing like today.
nothing
So
compared to today.
it's just rivalry.
Right. It was more of a
It
rivalry.
was just rivalry.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's kind of sad to see you have to going to school, you have to go through the security, like you're going
Right. Who would have thought of?
I would have never thought of that,
Yeah, we never thought of that when we were in high school. We just walked in and out, and like I said, we just had fun when we were in high school.
Oh,
It's just a lot. It's just a lot different.
a lot different.
So,
Well, I got one more question to ask you, which is our theme for this particular show, and it's about rhythm. And I'd like to know not only what does rhythm mean to you, but what does it mean for you?
okay, well, rhythm. We won't go to the musical sense because I know you. That's your area of expertise. But rhythm in life, the consistency. In music, it's a cadence, repeating cadence. I guess in life, you want to have rhythm with your spouse, keep in tune, in motion with them. Hopefully, you have that rhythm so you can keep that relationship going. You're thinking alike. You're not going to think alike on everything. You got to have maybe one song out, something outbeat, but most of the time we try to stay with each other. In life in general, I think we need a rhythm with all the issues that's going on today. We might have a different beat, but we all can march to the same. We all want the same thing in the end. So, in the terms of rhythm for life, I would think hopefully we can get that. We're very can stay in tune with each other and hopefully make this world a better place. So that's what rhythm will be to me and the purpose of life right now.
Oh, wow. Beautiful words, buddy. Beautiful words. It has been such a pleasure to talk with you and touch base. And of course, we keep in touch with each other on Facebook from time to time now, and that's wonderful. Which is how I do that with most of our friends.
Yeah, that's a good thing about Facebook is that we can talk to people that we probably wouldn't be able to talk to. Like I said, Facebook is great for that. So it's been a pleasure, and glad that you invited me to do this. I really enjoyed seeing you, and let's stay in touch.
Definitely. I got one little small question for you. If you want to give some advice to our young people out there, the young people that listen to the show, and what would that be as far as your relationship to rhythm for them?
Don't give up. Even if you get off beat sometime, get back in tune with it and just keep on pushing. Life is a struggle. Sometimes you get knocked off, but you get knocked down, but don't get knocked out. Just keep pushing.
I like those words, buddy. On those words, I would like to thank you once again for coming on. And I send a lot of love to you and your family. And keep doing the things you're doing, man, throwing out that positive energy. And we will definitely keep in touch in the future.
All right. Sounds good. Take care.
Okay. You too, buddy.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
This is My Positive Podcast with Eddie C. Well, ladies and gentlemen, my next guest grew up in the Hawaiian culture. She's a filmmaker based in Honolulu, Hawaii. She was born in Portland. She'll tell you more about her story. But in the meantime, please welcome my next guest, Miss Cris Romento. How you doing, Cris?
Hi, Eddie. How are you? I'm
doing fine. Enjoying life and taking it one day at a time, as as they say. So, so you're now living in Seattle, Washington, right?
Yeah, I'm in Seattle. I'm in the process of moving offices. I think it's like the time of year everyone's moving right now, but everything's shifting, I guess, for the seasons. But yeah, I'm in Seattle now.
Okay. Well, can you tell my listeners a little bit about your background and your roots? Because I kind of said a little bit about it, but you'll probably make it a lot more clear for my listeners. So can you give us a little bit about your background and how you ended up in Seattle eventually?
Yeah, absolutely. So like you're saying, I'm from Hawaii. I consider myself, an islander at heart. I was born in Portland, but I always tell people it's kind of an interesting story because my parents met in Hawaii. And so essentially my father's Hawaiian and my mother is Mexican. And my mother went to school in Hawaii. She got a scholarship to attend. And so, yeah, so she got a scholarship to attend school in Hawaii. And after a few months of dating, my dad's this, local guy, Hawaiian guy. She left and she moved back to Portland where her family was living at the time.
Okay.
Yeah. So she moved back to Portland and, this is before the land of iPhones and computers. Old school. Like, I think it's funny. Old schools are letters now, but
yeah.
Yeah. So she moved back a couple months after they were dating. And then without any prior indication, my dad just showed up at her doorstep one day.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's romantic.
Right. And it's so funny because the way they tell the story is not very, romantic, but I look at it as like, oh my God, maybe this is where my interest in love stories happened. But
okay.
Yeah, but he just showed up on her doorstep. She's living with her parents. So my grandpa, my abuelito, answers the door and is like, who is this guy at the door?
Well, that's quite romantic. So your parents ended up having a luau and you showed up.
Yeah, they had a luau, an indoor luau, in a private luau, and they had me. Yeah, so they were living in Portland. My dad followed her. And the funny thing is my grandmother told him when he was leaving Hawaii, she said, you're paddling your own canoe. So you're paddling your own canoe. You're going to go there for a girl. We're not taking you back. So
exactly.
Yeah, he went, paddled his own canoe, came back. They had me in Portland and then came back to Hawaii where I essentially spent my childhood. And
oh, that's wonderful. It's great it's a beautiful story. My public can't see it, but I can, and they can take my word. You are a very lovely young lady.
Thank you.
So your parents did a very good job. Good genes. Very good genes.
Thank you. I appreciate it. My mother would love to hear that.
Okay. So you came back to, but how did you end up in Seattle, in fact?
Well, it's been a while. It's been a journey since then. But
A little bit, we have time. So please,
oh my God.
please tell us.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I spent my childhood in Seattle, I guess, going back to there. But professionally, I guess that is why I'm, here in the Pacific Northwest, as we like to call it in America, which is like Oregon and Washington State. And so my parents lived in Portland. I've also lived in Portland, but I've also, just for work, traveled a lot. So I went to college in Washington State, and then I traveled quite a bit for work as far as moved. So I've moved into different cities like Chicago, Austin, Hawaii, Portland, Los Angeles. So how long? I left the rock.
What brought you to Chicago, in fact?
That's another story. I mean, I love Chicago, but I only stayed there for a summer, but I still claim it because I learned a lot that summer. Obviously it was my first time on, not having a car and, being on the subway, whatnot. I was working for Fox News. So I was working for Fox News Chicago, which is a local news station there. But the reason why I went, I got all these job offers on the West Coast, but I was like, I'm going to work for Oprah. Oprah was at the time, I think it was about.
She was the icon.
She's still, yeah. I mean, Oprah is still my number one. But I wanted to work for Harpo Productions, which is her company. And so I said, I'm going to go to Oprah. I had no idea, did not know anybody there. And I found an apprenticeship through the Asian American Journalists Association that was in Chicago. And so I was able to have someone take me under their wing and also be like a production assistant for Fox News Chicago. So that was really cool right out of college. I think I was like 21. And found a distant relative that lived in Wicker Park and then slept in their on an air mattress in their like pantry, like, tiny, and was like, had a few suits and would just go to work and like be like, I'm going to find someone who knows Oprah. And
exactly.
Yeah. So I did that for a summer, and it was great. I love Chicago so much.
It's a beautiful city. I always tell people that a lot of people, when they think of America, they always think about New York. And I say, well, check out Chicago and you might think differently. There's this sort of laid back feeling. You go into the center part of town. There's the food, there's the restaurants. There's a whole kind of, I don't know, it's special. Chicago is very special compared to, for example, New York, in New York, everybody knows a guy that knows a guy that knows a girl that knows a guy,
Yeah.
And in Chicago, there's this sort of laid back way, and you haven't had a hot dog until you've been into Chicago. A real hot dog you have a real hot dog in Chicago with mustard.
Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, food was incredible. It was my first experience. I mean, I had traveled a bit. I never traveled to Chicago at that point, but I had traveled to New York and Washington, D.C. But it was my first time, like, living somewhere where there's so much food around, and I ate so much, and I was working on Michigan Avenue. So I was taking the subway from Wicker Park to Michigan Avenue. Is it subway underground? Yeah. So I was doing that, and it was just such a lovely time. And I also, first time I actually, in America, I mean, it was for me compared to, being in Hawaii and then we moved back to Portland. It was the first time I saw, other than in like Hawaii, lived in a place where, people of color were in like prominent positions. Like I hadn't grown,
right.
And it was really cool to see all these like chefs and lawyers and people who, traveled and were successful. And it was my first real interaction with those kinds of people.
Well, I know you're a filmmaker, but how did you actually get involved with the whole filmmaking thing? Because you mentioned about wanting to, working for the TV stations and everything, but your passion seems to be into filmmaking. So how did that evolve?
So it evolved essentially because I worked So when I studied television production in college, I was really young when I knew that I wanted to work in some sort of visual media, like very, very young. I would say about 5, like I already knew. And then when I got older, I knew. So I wasn't like ready to go to college. I was like, I want to get out and I just want to go see the world. But I spent time going to college. My parents obviously were like really huge enforcers on going to college. So I went to college, studied television production. And
Right.
from there, I started working. I started doing internships at different like local news stations or places that like made commercials, for instance. And
Mm-hmm.
so that was my start in I working in television first, and worked all around in different news stations, and then went into entertainment television and reality TV. So that was my start, but it was always kind of in the back of my head, I think, is creating my own stories and creating my own narratives. I wrote them down at a very early age, but I was kind of infatuated with the high you can get of news, and also just journalism. I really enjoyed as well. I loved Christiane
Mm-hmm.
Amanpour. She was my idol at that time.
Okay.
So I wanted that kind of life of like news, because I loved it, and I loved the community there.
You said that started at a very young age, in fact, that you were interested in the news, which is that's pretty special at a very young age, that you're, from off a little child actually decided to be interested in news. I mean, most kids want to go out and play with their Barbies and stuff like that, but you were interested in what's going on in the world, what's
Yeah. Well, I don't think it was news as much as it was stories, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, it was definitely just telling people stories and just kind of playing around with a camera. That was my thing back then.
You started out actually as wanting to be behind the camera and film the way people were living their lives and stuff, and then tell the stories around that, more or less.
Yeah, absolutely. That was the thing. I mean, I was my parents had a home camera, and I remember always stealing it. And actually, one of my biggest inspirations was like my dad had a friend when we moved back to the Pacific Northwest from Hawaii. And he was the one who really nurtured that. He gave me his camera because I was always stealing it. And so I was always stealing his camera and then working on it. And I would just sit for hours and hours just making these little home videos inside the camera, because at that point, video editing wasn't a thing. And so I was making these it was even a big thing then to own a video camera. And he saw that and he gave me the camera. And he was the one who built my first computer where I was editing. And it was just like, I would get absolutely lost. And I think the main reason for that was I felt that the camera gave me a way of belonging that I couldn't get from the outside world. Like I felt really at home creating these little emotions. And so maybe if I was really shy or I didn't get along with people, maybe if I showed them something that made them laugh or feel something that, they would like me more or like I could share them something that would make them feel good. And I was absolutely in love with that. From the first moment I've held a camera. I've been obsessed with telling stories, and these videos, by the way, were like of my family's parties. So, imagine me like this little kid at adult parties. My parents are Mexican and Hawaiian, so they love to have a good time.
Yeah, well, that's quite a mixture of a culture of Mexicans and Hawaiians together.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
Yeah, they would have the parties, and then we would. I'd videotape everybody attending the parties and sit them down and ask them questions at these parties. So,
well, let me ask you something about that. Having a mix of a Hawaiian and Mexican background, was there ever a point in your time where you wanted to choose? Well, I'm going to be more Mexican, I'm going to be more Hawaiian, or you just said, I'm just going to be me?
That's a really, really good question, Eddie, because this is actually something that I struggled with my whole life. And I have just kind of started writing a bit about, as far as, like thinking of ideas of how I could make this a story on camera, like, mixed race people, mixed race children, I think have this different sense of otherness that, has to do with passing in different ways or not feeling enough of one thing because you have your toe dipped in one culture more than the other. And it took me a really long time to figure out, like, I'm just going to be myself. But I did have a lot of that growing up, identity crisis of, not being Latina enough or not being Hawaiian enough or not looking a certain way, or people, coming up to me and be like, you don't look this way. So I struggled with it because I couldn't figure it out. And I think for me, I was growing up in an Asian household, like bar none. I mean, I grew up in Hawaii. The main majority population of Hawaii is Asian. And I grew up surrounded by a lot of families from Hawaii. So I grew up in an Asian household, and that's what I had a lot of. But my mother was also very proudly Mexican. So
well, it's kind of unique because when I see you, I see both of your cultures. I mean, your parents did an excellent mix of making you, if I may say so, because I see the Asian look, but at the same time, depending on how you probably would do your makeup or how you would dress, you're Mexican as well. I see both sitting there, and it's pretty cool to see that on you. I mean, I have also I have 3 European kids as well, and so they're mixed. When I see my Dutch kids as well, there's also this mixture of European and Afro-American blood in there. But myself, I'm also actually mixed because from my side, there's also my American Indian. I can say Native Indian American that you see in me with my nose and my high bone structure in my face. So that's there along with my African roots as well. So I can understand it. And in my family, we have a lot of mixture of different cultures. So I can understand the sort of identity thing that you're going through. I can also imagine that depending on where you're living at that particular point, depending on the culture surroundings, which direction you want to more or less go, and at one point you seem to, you found it for yourself where you said, I'm just me. And that's wonderful. So getting back to that, I got another question around that. If you look at the Hawaiian culture and the Mexican culture, Hawaii is actually, that's the one state which is not connected to the rest of the states. And Mexico, of course, is not part of the states at all. So with the mix of those two cultures, how do you feel as an American?
Yeah, I honestly I didn't really answer that for myself until I moved overseas, which was how I feel as an American in both cultures is like, I always have this sort of, now I see it as a strength. Before I didn't know it was, but when I moved overseas, it was interesting because that's when people accepted my otherness. I mean, I had a lot of people when I was overseas and I would be like, yeah, I live in, where are you from? I'd say, yeah, I'm from this island, Hawaii, because I never assumed anybody overseas knew exactly. There's 50 states in America. There's a lot. So I was just trying to explain like where I was. Across the board, everyone knew where Hawaii was, everyone, and always had the smile on their face when they talked about it. And so it made me feel very proud of my culture, and everyone people would say, oh, you're not really American. Like I get that a lot of people, because of my mixed race, and I was not finding it a source of pride. I was always kind of found it as a source of confusion for people, and always having to explain myself. When I moved overseas, it meant that I could easily transfer to different places and fit in. And I never experienced that in my life besides living in Hawaii. So
Well, you're talking about when you talk about moving overseas, you mean when you came to the American
No,
continent
when I moved,
itself?
I'm sorry. So I mean overseas,
Yeah, because I
I lived
was
in Saudi Arabia. Which is a different
okay.
story.
Yeah. Well, so that's a
Yeah, that's
whole
a whole
different. That's a
different
different because
tomato.
you said when I moved over. Okay.
Yeah.
So you went to the Middle
Yes.
East to live in Saudi Arabia. Okay. Now we're going in because I was a little bit. I was starting to get a little bit confused. Does she mean the going to the mainland of the states, or in this case you're talking about the actual going overseas to the Middle East? Okay.
Yes.
All right. So. And so please go
I'm so
further
sorry,
for
Eddie.
me,
Yeah,
please.
I moved overseas to Saudi Arabia, and that is what I mean by kind of understanding a sense of my culture, because I could wear, an abaya and people would think that I was Middle Eastern and speak Arabic to me, or I'd go to France and wear something a little more European and people would speak French to me or Spanish or Portuguese. So, and
Mm-hmm.
finally,
Mm-hmm.
people would call me different things in different places. Like I would even go to Indonesia and I have Filipino ancestry. And so, people would sometimes be able to tell. They'd be like, "Oh, are you this?" And in Saudi Arabia, there's a lot of Filipino people. And that was my first time, I had never traveled to the Philippines then. And it was my first time meeting a lot of different people from the Philippines, besides, people in my family. So it made me feel,
Mm-hmm.
as an American, I felt like, I felt stronger in that I was a fluid American. And it's a story that's not very told very frequently. And it's a narrative that still
Mm-hmm.
needs to be in mainstream media, because I think, like, as you said, Eddie, you have a couple of mixed race children. And I think that's starting to be the thing, is like, there's a lot of people with biracial mixed race identities. And we don't see these narratives in television or really in film.
That's true. Getting on that subject of the biracial thing, how do you see yourself now? I mean, if people ask me, they ask me, well, how do I see myself? I came to Europe in 1975, and I actually never really looked back. I've been to the States a few times to see family and everything, but basically, I see myself personally as a sort of a world citizen, because I also, with my career as a musician, I've traveled a lot in different places around the world, and I've been very fortunate to be part of that, let's say, old school musician scene that got a chance to perform in different parts of the world. So when people ask me, I say, well, my roots are American, but I see myself as a world citizen.
Yeah, and that makes absolute sense, especially if you haven't been back to America in a minute, and you have, children that live in both worlds. For me, I always tell people I'm an islander at heart. You can put me in heels, but you can't take the Hawaii out of the girl. I mean,
Well, exactly. What we always say, you take the boy out the country, but you can't
That's
take the
right.
country out of the
And
boy.
there's this remake of a song, John Denver's song, that Country Road song. We do it in Hawaii. This very
Right.
famous singer, Israel Kamakawiwiole Brada, he does this song, Country Roads Take Me Home, but it's like a Hawaiian version. But it's very much like, the same. It's like,
Right.
I'm the same girl, barefoot, climbing mango trees as I am, like, in heels, or walking around in a different part, maybe not wearing something that's like you would wear in Hawaii, but I'm still that person at heart. And I grew up with certain values that are, I mean, America's a huge cultural puddle, and I feel that
Yes, it is.
I feel that I if I were to be called on as an American, I would really hope I'd be doing a good representation of that and how that looks like for the future.
Right.
So that's kind of how I see myself. I would never and racially ambiguous. I always call myself a racially ambiguous girl from Hawaii, because I feel
Right.
that makes sense.
If you look at how our world has developed over the years, we have now social media. You're from the social media generation. In fact, if we were start comparing each other, I think that there's a large difference in that sense. We're two completely generations. It's sort of like I think I'm more like for the generation from your parents compared to, let's say, someone who is more your age. But I talking with you because we had a couple of conversations beforehand, which led up to our conversation we're having now for the show. I noticed that you have actually, for such a young lady, you have picked up quite a lot, and you're a very determined person with a lot of positivity, and which is why one of the reasons I wanted to have you on my show. When I look at what you told me and your journey you've been on to up to now, just as what you said, you went to overseas, you started to discover yourself. As I hear our conversation, I do hear that those Hawaiian roots are the ones that kind of like stick out the most.
Yeah, well, I mean, just growing up in Hawaii, they do because I've been surrounded by it. But, at the same time, that does not differ from the fact that I also grew up with a very proudly Mexican mother. And, in Hawaii at that time, Spanish was my first language. It was. And however, when I was in Hawaii, the only person I spoke Spanish to was my mother. I mean, everyone else around us were Asian. And so I didn't, and mixed race is a huge thing in Hawaii. We have a lot of different mixed race. So it's not, you're talking about Korean, you're talking about Filipino, you're talking about lots of Pacific Islanders.
Were you all speaking English or?
Yeah, we were all speaking English, but the interesting thing is in schools in Hawaii, you'll learn different things like the Japanese, how to count to 10 in Japanese and how to say this in Hawaiian. You know what I mean? So it's like a very universal place because it's cosmopolitan. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of mixing cultures there. But when we moved back to the mainland, to America, right. From Hawaii, I did open up and learn a little bit more about my Mexican side. And I do feel also very proudly Latina. I mean, my mother immigrated from Mexico, and at that time I was really, I didn't know how to act around being Mexican because I guess where I was living, it wasn't actually a source of pride. I grew up with a lot of, in high school, it was a lot of white people. And so I felt like safer saying I was Hawaiian and not really go into my Mexican side.
Okay. So it was more like a comfort zone that you had in that
Not at first, okay, but I'm very proudly Latina now. And I speak Spanish and, I tried to represent, but, in mixed race cultures, it's like you're trying to be as you float in a lot of these different things. Like when I have a party at my house, it's like enchiladas, and then there's also Kahlua pig.
That's what I was going to say. I was just getting ready to say, hey, you cannot forget the tacos and the enchiladas. I mean, hey, that's major. With
the Kahlua pig and the poi, and the Hawaiian food too. So it's like all this mix of food, and then Filipino food like lumpia, pancit. So like we have all these foods at our parties, and it's just so funny. It's truly how I grew up having like a palm tree as the Christmas tree, and then also Mexican pottery hanging up as well. Oh, wow. So it was just like,
oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to shift over to what you're actually doing now, because we spoke about how you ended up in Seattle, but you were telling us that you worked for television stations doing a reality show programs, right?
I did. I worked for a company that did reality TV, and that was just something I did in Los Angeles for a little bit, but I also worked in different television stations as well. So it was, and then went into entertainment television. So that was kind of my career in television, and went entertainment television, meaning like, then you're talking more instead of, news stories, topical news stories, you're talking about, 5 top dresses at the Oscars, or, life hack.
You started focusing at one point on documentaries, right? And I I see that you had something about you have your one of your credits, Someone I Used to Know, that was in 2021, and then the documentaries, Not Your Vegan,
Not Your Vegan, yeah.
and yeah, Not Your Vegan, sorry,
That was
and
okay.
the Aloha film, yeah, I've been living in Europe. That's the
Probably how
European
they
part of
say it.
me.
Yeah, I have friends who speak vegan. I forgot because oh my god, it's been forever since I've.
But I mean vegan. Yeah. But for my Dutch and Belgium listeners, they will say vegan,
Yeah.
so I mean vegan.
Oh man,
You know. It's like the thing tomato.
I'm in the wrong right now. Yeah, exactly. Not Your Vegan. I miss Europe so badly. By the way, I miss it so much.
What parts of Europe were you in? Did you go to?
I just traveled a little bit. After I left Saudi, I just kind of floated for a little bit, taking some gap time before I moved back to America. And I just floated around, but I really love, I just love it. Like some of my best friends live in England and Ireland and Belgium. So
okay. Well, what part of Belgium did you go to? Brussels or
I've never been to Belgium, but I have spent some time in Ireland and England and Italy. But yeah, so I'm not as familiar, and I would never consider myself.
Well, you should definitely put Belgium on your list of places to see when you come to Europe.
I want to 100% when I'm able to. I'm on the first plane to go because I miss my friends so much overseas.
Oh, that's wonderful. So tell us a bit about those, the documentaries and the other things that you're working on, because you also have a film coming out pretty soon.
Yes.
Yourself. I think the release is in a couple of weeks, right?
Yes. Well, it's actually premiering at a film festival that's here that's in Seattle called Local Sightings. So there's a lot of diverse indie films that are playing at this film festival, and so film festivals just opened up here. I mean, as being able to attend in person, and so is premiering at a film festival, and then I'll probably release it online to be streaming. But yeah, it's going to be on September 19th is the actual day where it can be watched online or premiering.
Okay, and what's the name of the movie?
The movie's name is Someone I Used to Know, and it's a short film. It's not a very long film at all. It's a short film. Essentially, I like to call it a poetic breakup story. It's essentially a film about art and culture weaving through this sort of life and representation of that when you're feeling your way through a breakup. And it's about I guess it's really about I like to call it a love letter to who we are in our 20s and that age and that kind of dreamlike intensity you can have in love, and then the choices you have to make. Sometimes there are people in that time of your life where they really shape you, but you don't necessarily end up together. And that's what that celebrates. It celebrates a goodbye and honors that. And it's just this little art film based on my own life, actually. And I need it.
Okay, so it's more or less autobiographical and about you, basically, and saying goodbye to a relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's a bit autobiographical, sure, but it's also, it was very surreal to be creating these scenes where they're based on my own memory or my idea of what a memory looks like in your head as you're processing a breakup, And I think a lot of that, so it's actually a silent film. Like it's just a beautiful music track underneath, and you get to explore this relationship. And I think there's a lot of truth to that, because people can't lie as much when they're trying to explain something or convey something in their eyes versus a dialogue. And it just plays out that way, because I don't think necessarily memory is so much what was said as much as the edges around it, like how someone's eyes felt on you, how the light was, or like these like soft movements that happen that don't have a sense of time. And so that's really what the film is, just showing those parts of the relationship. And wow. the main character, who is based off of me, is experiencing it.
Okay. So what you're actually telling with the film is actually a more or less a silent film, which is based on the visuality of the emotion that you see on the people that are performing the roles.
Yes, yes. So, I mean, I guess it could be called an artistic film, a very artistic film. I mean, like kind of like a music video, essentially. Except, there's no dialogue and it's just a beautiful track underneath it. So that it's just a short film based on a breakup, but really celebrating what that means and showing the empowerment of breaking up or saying goodbye, because I don't think we really show that strength, especially with women. And especially when it might be a dark tunnel and there's not somebody waiting for you at the other end with arms wide open. And I feel that for me, I wanted to convey, to make people feel less alone and make people feel like it's okay if you break up in your 20s. It's, you're going to be okay.
All right. So is this based, because you told me your age, you're a little bit older than you were probably when you decided to make this concept, I imagine.
Yeah. I mean, I also have deceiving genes, because I'm 36, but most people think I'm 10 years younger, which is
well, take it in pleasure. I get that a lot as well. So
you do. You look very yeah. It's our mixed genes, I think.
Exactly. This is the mixed genes, I guess you could say. Well, there's this thing, which is a beautiful thing about that, is when you're traveling, when you have the opportunity to be able to mix your cultures, your background cultures, along with new cultures that you experience, whether it's traveling to Europe, whether it's traveling to other parts of the world, that you discover not only more about yourself, along with discovering other cultures. It helps to gel you as you get older, and you are able to more or less mingle with people. I think that's very important as well. I'm very curious about your movie and how it's going to turn out. And if you have a link or something like that, I'll definitely post it on the page for this episode. I have one more question I want to ask you, which is our theme for this particular show, and it's about rhythm. And my whole philosophy about rhythm, we spoke about that when we talked to each other a couple of weeks ago on the phone. So I want to know not only what does rhythm mean to you, but what does it mean for you?
It's such a good question. One of my favorite quotes is by a musician. Musicians know rhythm so well. And it's, you might have heard it. It's musicians don't retire. They stop when there's no music in them, by Louis Armstrong. But I feel that way about film. And I think what I have learned specifically about rhythm is kind of understanding that creative ebb and flow in your own life. So personally, understanding and having that agreement with how creativity will come in. Sometimes it's huge bursts at inconvenient times, and you have to just start and do it. And sometimes it's very, very difficult. But kind of the rhythm to me is in accepting those beats as they come, and sometimes in unexpected ways, and realizing that there is some sort of plan out there from whatever you believe in, whether it's, God, universe, some sort of source, that there is a plan out there that's going to work out for you. So it's being in that flow is a creative rhythm for me, that I've had to learn through a lot of trial and error, and realizing that, especially with films, it's not necessarily right away. You have to, there's times when it's right. I mean, I didn't even travel overseas really until I was 30, and I wanted to travel younger, but looking back and connecting the dots, I understand that was happening at the time it needed to happen. So that's the rhythm of life, right? As cliche as that sounds.
Well, it's just, it doesn't necessarily have to be seen as cliche. I think that it's always a personal personal feeling that one has. And for you, it's this. Well, I mean, along with saying those things about, rhythm, are there any particular situations or incidences in your life where you can say, this was a moment where I kind of found my rhythm, which is going to help me achieve what I want to do?
Yeah. There were a lot of times when I had kind of pushed or tried to force things to happen. Like, so for instance, we'll take the film that I recently had just finished. It took me 2 years to finish this film. And a lot of that had to do with, processing the incredible feat it is to make a film about your own life, which was difficult for me to edit quickly, because I had to go through a lot of life experiences in order to edit in a way that could show and tell people what I was trying to convey, which was, a celebration of a goodbye. And so that took me a while, but that was something where I thought it was going to come quicker. And, the lockdowns and quarantining happened for everybody and completely shut the film industry down. And that was a time when understanding and honoring that rhythm of pause that was necessary, I went and started exploring my own ideas and writing down a lot of these other ideas I had, which is like my documentary, Not Your Vegan, and the Aloha film, and writing these down. And by the time this year came, I was in a position where I was able to put these to fruition. But if you asked me 3 years ago, all of these documentaries would have been finished and this film would have premiered. And the thing was, it's premiering at the right time now, because I can actually go and attend the place it's going to be premiering. I wouldn't have been able to do that if it was online. And I'm at a place where I'm able to share the story and explain it and do all the marketing that has to do around it now, versus then I didn't have the ability to do that, because I didn't have, maybe the finances or the materials or know the people who could help me in these positions. And now I do. And so I'm able to do justice for my story or my film, I feel, that I wouldn't have been able to if I had gone on my own schedule, which was forced and kind of nagging that it had to be done quicker than it was ready. Nothing before its time. You know what I mean? I love that saying. It's like, nothing happens until.
Mm-hmm. Well, okay. I'm gonna to give you a little extension to that question. If I was to ask you, which I'm asking you now, describe to me in one sentence what rhythm means to you.
I feel rhythm is the universe's way of communicating the ebb and flow of your own personal journey. I know that is that you want a more filmmaking one, or is that one?
No, I want you to speak from your heart, because that's what this program is about. It's about positivity and people speaking from their hearts. So if that's what it means for you, I can go with that.
Yeah, I think for me, it's rhythm means creativity, and following the rhythm of creativity in my own life, in my own personal filmmaking goals and my aspirations, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
And I would be amiss if I didn't also explain that I have a huge reverence for rhythm in my own work and musicians. I am the person who is so obsessed with finding the perfect track for a production or for something I'm creating. And editing is such a rhythm. It is such a huge part of the process. And what I mean by that is that in film, there's 24 frames per second. So you have 24 cuts in that 1 second. And if you do 3 frames less or 3 frames more, you might miss a blink or a certain little smirk that someone makes, or these little tiny expressions.
Right.
And for me, it's very important to have that rhythm down of being a subconscious thing for viewers, so that they're feeling emotion instead of like looking at an edit. And a lot of that has to do with, when someone's walking left, that next shot is going to follow their movement, or someone's hand movement. You're going to see the reaction of that hand movement. And that is a rhythm in itself. I'm obsessed with. I am so obsessed with, and it's story. Rhythm is story. You can't tell a good story without a good edit, and edit is all about rhythm, all about it.
All right. Well, on those words, I want to thank you for coming on the show and telling your story. And it was a very enjoyable time for me, and I hope for you as well. And for my listeners that will hear this story, that they know a little bit more about what it takes to make a film, even a short film, because like you said, it's not really a long movie that you're making, but you're making a short film, and how much energy and time is needed in the process to create those minutes that they see on the screen.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed speaking to you, especially as a musician and knowing so much about rhythm yourself.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Cris. And I wish you a lot of love, a lot of success with your movie. I will definitely post the link that you sent to me on the website, and we will definitely keep in touch. And I might write some music for you once for one of your movies, because I also compose,
Oh my goodness, that would be amazing. I would love to hear about that.
All right. Well, we'll talk about that outside of the show. Okay. Thank you so much for coming on, and once again, a lot of success. And mention the name of the movie one more time for my listeners.
Someone I Used to Know. It is September 19th, Local Sightings Film Festival, and I will send a link so you're able to watch online.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, and aloha.
Thank you. Aloha.
This is MPP, and I'm Eddie C. Well, I had 3 very nice interviews once again, and of course they were longer, and that gave a little bit more listening pleasure to you all as well. I hope you enjoyed the interviews with my 3 guests. And rhythm is one of the most important things. Is actually, I live my life by rhythm. That's my basis. That's my philosophy, finding the right rhythm for whatever I do. And I think without a good rhythm in your life, you're not going to succeed at the things that you want. And some things might take a little longer, but that's why you have to find your rhythm to reach those goals and to achieve them. And on those words, here's my quote. Rhythm. It starts at birth, from the moment you exist. The beat of your heart that sets your life in tempo to develop as you grow older and wiser. Falling and standing, but eventually finding that rhythm that will balance with your lifestyle. Finding your groove in life, love, and the freedom to dance to the beat of your own drum in heart and spirit. Well, that's about it for this episode, ladies and gentlemen. But before I go, I'd like to thank my 3 guests, Olga Stuzhinskaye, Gregory Washington, and Cris Romento, for coming on the show and sharing their stories about what rhythm means to them. And remember, rhythm is always there. You just have to find the rhythm that fits to your lifestyle. Until next time, You can find me on all platforms like Spotify, Android, and Apple. On Facebook, look for My Positive Podcast, and my website is mypositivepodcast.com. You can also contact me via my website or Facebook. A very special thanks to my technical producer, Iswan. This show is a production by Antwerp Podcast Service. My name is Eddie C., and this was MPP, My Positive Podcast. Tune in next week and stay positive.